Welcome to Insights into Success, where today I'm very excited to be talking to a highly successful entrepreneur and business consultant, Terry Dry. Now, have you ever wondered about whether some business consultants are really that successful, or whether in fact they're making their money by telling other people what to do, having not necessarily done it themselves? Well, Terry's created several very successful businesses that he went on to sell for significant amounts of money. He now splits his time between his business projects and sharing his knowledge and experience with other business owners. I have to say I'm really excited to talk to you. When I look at your profile, one of the concerns I have with people and with consultancy businesses is that to what extent have people really walked the talk? So I'm excited to talk to you because certainly, when I look at what you've done, you've really walked the talk. You might be helping consult with people, but you've actually been there and done a lot of it. Whereas, there's certainly, there's lots of examples out there of people where I'm like, have you really done that much? Or really, is it this whole consultancy or being a motivational guru or whatever, that's really where you're going to make your money? You've never really made any money in the past. This is where you're going to make it. So I'm always a little bit cynical. So for me, looking at what you've done, to me, you're the real deal. So I'm really interested to talk to you. And first and foremost, I want to understand about your upbringing. I want to take you right back and I want to learn about you from the early days and move right up. So, and the reason for that really is just to kind of get a feel for what's shaped who you are and why you've done what you have. And also too, for people that either watch or listen to this, to kind of get inspiration that to be successful, you don't have to fit a particular mold insofar as you don't have to come from a rich family. You don't have to come from a poor family either. But everyone has an opportunity, and it's a case of whether they take that opportunity or not. If we could, I'd love for you to go back and just, go over your upbringing from the early days and working through school and that, and just giving a bit of an overview, and whether when you were young you kind of had any pointers for what you're going to ultimately do, and then just talk us through your career.
All right. Thank you. I'm happy to. I hope it's not boring, but I grew up right in the city in Chicago, Illinois. So I grew up in an apartment building right in the city and was total city kid. I learned pretty early on that I'm very fortunate. I'm like a total mama's boy. I have great parents who I love my parents. I had a great brother, so we're a very happy family growing up, and I never was lost on me how fortunate I was for that.
Yeah.
And I kind of learned at an early age that I didn't really like going to school, and I also didn't like cold weather. So Chicago wasn't the ultimate place for me. And then by the time I hit teenage years, I was I was into music my entire life. Yeah. And I was just like, I want to live in Los Angeles and work at a record company. And I had that in my head from like 12 years old. And I was always very driven to do that stuff. And I still went to school. It wasn't like I cut it, but it just wasn't my passion. And that was it. Go ahead.
So with the music, like, was it that you wanted to be a musician, or did you always kind of see yourself more as kind of being on more of the management side?
Yeah, I think I knew really early on I would be a really crappy musician, and I think I proved that. I took drum lessons and I wasn't even good, and I think I quit, really early too. I just wasn't good at it. But I always wanted to be the guy behind the guy, and I always liked the strategy. I always liked the business side. I was always interested in being creative, like to your point, but from a business entrepreneurial side. And I also had this sort of real genuine feeling, which I still have to this day, of like, I want to do things that help others. I want to do things that make people happy. And for me, music was that. Music could change my mood. Music had such an influence on me. And I really had this genuine thing of like, I want to help get music out to the masses and help do that and be a part of it. But I never wanted to be on stage. I liked being backstage or to the side of the stage, which I did get to that point, and then it turned out I didn't really like that either. Or I got tired of it. I got tired of it, I should say. I liked it.
So one of the early qualities it seems that you had was to be a realist. So you at an early age, you realized that to be a musician wasn't really going to be your jam. So you were prepared to accept that and move on and saw other opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And I looked at it like I was really interested in the industry. I remember like being like 11 years old and buying an album and going, ooh, I think it'll be this single will be the first single, then this one. And I would like study how they try to put it on MTV. And I became sort of a student of the industry. And I've just always been a very curious person. So I would add to like the certainly realist and pragmatic, but also extremely curious. And I think that's probably a good trait to have because I still am now. But yeah, that was my goal. And I started working in a record store, which doesn't even exist anymore. You know, those don't even exist anymore. But that was my job in high school.
So what do you put that down to? Because it's quite unusual, I would have said, to be thinking in those terms when you're that sort of age. What would you put that? Is there any pointers in your family for why you would be like that, or it's just a spontaneous thing? It's just the way you were.
I don't know. I guess it's the way I was wired. I was always kind of, my father was a stockbroker and my mother was a publicist, and so I used to see, I sort of had the arts from my mom and I had the business from my dad, and that was always interesting. And but no, I don't know. They used to tell me they used to call me like a little old man, like that I had some kind of wisdom or whatever. But that feels weird to me. But I don't really know why. It was just kind of where I put my time and my energy.
Yeah. So like your upbringing, would it be fair to say it was quite modest? You weren't from a really wealthy family, but you're just kind of modest. Would that be fair?
Yeah, we weren't wealthy. We were certainly better off than modest, but we weren't like filthy rich. Yeah, so I was lucky. I would say I was an upper middle class upbringing and very fortunate that way. I was kind of grounded in, having gone to public school, but then also going to private school. So I really did get the value of lots of different experiences as a kid. And I also think growing up in the city like that, like taking public transportation everywhere and you had a lot of independence and a lot of freedom. You kind of grow up fast. You see a lot of things and good and bad, but it kind of accelerates you a little bit. That's at least what I think happened. Yeah. I don't know. I don't really know.
It's funny, because I've just asked you that question. I've just realized how tainted that question was on my behalf, because you said that you were brought up in an apartment, and I immediately thought, oh, okay, they obviously didn't have a lot of money.
Oh, right.
But that's because of obviously here in New Zealand. But then while you're talking, I'm like, oh my God, like in Chicago, a lot of people live in apartments, and you have some really nice apartments. But because of my background living here in New Zealand, not that many people live in apartments, and there's nice apartments, but you kind of
No, you're totally right. And I did live in a nice apartment, like with a doorman and a nice building, and that with a nice view of the park. Like, so yes, and that was like everyone I knew. We all grew up in apartments. Like that was just in the city, how it was. So yeah, it is interesting, and it's funny. I couldn't wait to move away from there so I could live in a house one day. And I didn't live in a house till I was in my 30s.
Right. So just to clear this up, do you feel that, like, coming from a comfortable family, that was an advantage to you financially? Was it an advantage for you in business, or you feel that what you have achieved in your life has been very much just this is you? It has nothing to do with any sort of financial upbringing or that. It's just purely on you.
Yeah, I think it was on me. I've had that a lot. I certainly was exposed to things, but nothing was handed to me. Nobody, I'm self-made as far as what I did. That said, I was fortunate to come from a good family and have opportunities, but it wasn't like I have no trust fund. I would love all these things. I have no handouts, no trust fund, none of that, you know.
Yeah.
So I think my parents were really good at instilling like really hard work ethics and focus. And if we fast forward a little bit, when I moved to California,
Yeah.
My drive was because it was very, I went to college and my dad's like, that's it, you're on your own, like, see you later.
You're gone.
And I was always driven by the fear of having to live through another winter in Chicago. I was like, that happened. And that was like my biggest drive was I got to make my LA dream like work. But I know I just skipped ahead in the chronology. But so I don't think I was handed everything. But by the same token, I certainly wasn't struggling and fighting, for a meal either.
Yeah. So taking a step back, at school you weren't a great student just because it didn't really, spin your wheels. But you went on to university. What did you study at university?
I studied business and marketing. So it was, but I will say this, all I wanted to do was move to Los Angeles. So I don't know about, did you have like the college counselor when you were in school, like somebody who helped you like pick where you were going to go to university?
Yeah. Yeah.
And did they talk to you about like, what do you want to study, Paul?
Not for me, because I already knew what I was doing, so I didn't bother going to them. But yeah, but other people do. But yeah.
So we had to do it. Yeah. So that's interesting because you and I are similar in that way. Like I knew, but all I knew was I'll never forget this meeting. She's like, okay, so what do you want to study? And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, well, I pulled out a road atlas. This is obviously before internet. And I opened it up to Los Angeles. And I'm like, we got to find a school here. And it's like, what do you mean? I go, because I want to live in Los Angeles. Like that's where I'm going. And I want to work in the music business. And it's either New York or LA. And I want warm weather. So can you help me find a school here that will have me? And she's like, well, what? And then that's how I said, she's like, well, what do you want? And I said, business and marketing are what are interesting to me. So that's what I wound up studying. And thank God I got into University of Southern California, which is right in downtown LA.
Right.
And because if I didn't get in there, I was too dumb to get into like UCLA or some of the other schools here. I didn't have good enough grades and things like that. So it's like, luckily I got in and all worked out.
So what age were you then when you came to LA and went to university?
Yeah, I was 17 years old. I had the classic, I was lucky. My dad made the mistake of saying when I was like 10 years old, hey, if you ever went to college like in California, you'd probably need to have your own car. And that never left me. I was like, wait, whoa. I get my own car? And so I need a car. So I had like the beat up Honda Civic, like the classic. Yeah. I loaded that thing up in Chicago, 17 years old, and drove across the country and came to school and never left. I went home the first 2 summers and then I never left. But I used to drive back and forth, which is
it's a big drive.
Yeah, 2,000 miles.
Yeah, I've driven from Chicago to Seattle, but I haven't driven from Chicago to LA. But yeah, it's a big drive.
Oh, you know the drive. Yeah, I used to take different routes and do different things. It was great seeing the country. And now, like, I don't think anyone would let like a 17-year-old drive alone across the country. No cell phone, none of that stuff. But I did, and I made it. So
how was it? Like 17 years old, going halfway or 3/4 of the way across the country. Presumably, you didn't know anyone in LA.
I was really lucky. One of my best friends in high school also went to USC, so we were roommates. So
perfect.
I was super lucky about that. But other than that, there was barely any family here. No one, not much. And for me, it was like an adventure. I was so excited to I was literally like a tourist. I was like, oh my God, I live in LA, and I liked the school. It was fine, but it was just exciting. I was like, I was like a tourist for the first year.
And you wanted to get into the music industry. So what was your plan? How did you go about achieving that?
Well, you'll probably be entertained that I timed it. So the very first night I got to LA, I went to see The Who in concert. So it was like I started right from the get-go. Before I ever even got to my dorm, I was at a concert. But yeah, I figured out like what are all the jobs I could do. And so throughout college, I was an intern at a record company. I
Yeah.
was an intern at a live music theater. I sold t-shirts at concerts and events at the arena that was near our college. And I was just trying to do every kind of job that was kind of like adjacent to the music business
Yeah.
and just start my networking and get my experience. So I was hustling. I wasn't much for like school. Like I wasn't part of like clubs or things. Like I
Yeah.
was like, I'm
You're
gonna start my
focused.
career. Yeah, I was totally focused that way, and it worked, which was great.
So aside from obviously the financial pressure that you mentioned before, what, if anything, were other motivations that really had you so focused? Because that's, most people, I would say, certainly at that age, wouldn't be as focused as what you were in terms of just being really driven that you were going to get into this.
When you went to Chicago, were you there in the winter?
No, I think it was August. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna joke and say if
Yeah.
you've been there in the winter, you'd know my drive, which was I really hated cold weather. But no, I don't think I know another way. I think that was instilled
Yeah.
in me from my dad. He worked a lot and worked hard, and I think I was really driven, and I think I was obnoxious and arrogant too. Like I'll be the
Yeah.
first to say that I, for some reason, thought like school is a waste of my time,
Yeah.
and I just gotta go like have a career and do this stuff. So I was so driven to like get on with my life. Like school to me, this is what a jerk I was. Really, it was like I was like, oh, this is like in my way. School is just not for me. That's for other people, and I'm ready to go. I know what I want to do, and so I
Yeah.
was just driven. Like I was just laser focused. Like this is what I wanted to do with my life, and I'm gonna do it. And it's only later in life that you're like, oh, that was a little bit much. You kind of
Yeah.
overdid it, but
Yeah.
still having fun. I mean, Las Vegas was only 4 hours away. So I was figuring that out too. That was
Yeah.
fun.
So talk me through that. So you finished university? Did you complete
Yeah,
university?
yeah. No, I did well. I was always good enough in school, and then yeah, I was very lucky that 4 days after graduating college, I got a job at the record company, which is called A&M Records, which I was interning for.
Yeah.
And so there was no running around or year off or any of that. I was literally 4 days later
Yeah.
started my career and never stopped. So
Yeah.
that was, but I had, a low entry level, I was a assistant to 4 people. I was given a desk in a hallway, no computer, no nothing. And they're like, go figure it out and getting
Yeah.
as little pay as you could get. And I just started paying my dues, if you will.
Yeah. So talk us through that. And I think your first business that you set up was in the music industry. So talk us through how you progressed and got to the point where you did that.
Yeah, so I worked this was all in the 90s, which I always kind of say was like the last sort of heyday of the music business before digital kind of came on. And I
Yeah.
kind of rose my way through the ranks at the record companies, and I really enjoyed it. It was wonderful. I had all these great experiences, all these great stories. I got to travel a lot. It was really cool. I learned a lot. And then I got to like what was then the biggest record company, and I was the youngest VP at the company, and it was really exciting. And then I started getting the itch. What had happened was the record company I kind of grew up in, was part of Universal Music Group, got sold, and they had a huge merger, and essentially 220 people at the record label I was part of became 20.
Wow.
And I was one of the 20. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I kind of lived with this awful survivor's guilt, that came with
Yeah.
that. But what it taught me was just how fast, some huge decision at a high level that I couldn't control could change the course of business, of lives. And that really impacted me, even though I was one of the fortunate ones. It impacted me because I'm like, I don't like this. I want to have control. I don't
Yeah.
want somebody telling me where I can and can't be. And so that's when the entrepreneur in me, I guess, really kicked in. And I was like, I want to have control of my own stuff. And at the time, I was setting up other businesses and just trying to be entrepreneurial. I guess you'd call it now the side hustle. And I had a couple side hustles going. And
Yeah.
then one of them started to take off. And that's I can explain more if that's where you want to go next.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tell me about that business.
Yeah, so I was in what was called artist development. So it was literally we would work with musicians and help them like stay connected to fans. So you have to think like late 90s, like before even email lists and websites and stuff. So
yeah,
once we started to see the internet take off, my business partner and I were like, wow, there's an opportunity here to sort of cut out all the middlemen and help artists be more connected to their fans. And you can use the internet to do this. And we started building databases and email lists, and we're like, we're going to create this world where they can sell directly to their fans, or they can communicate directly to their fans and create another thing for them. And that was our vision, and we set out to do it. And it started, we hired a guy who was our first intern, and he worked out of my partner, like all the stories you want, in my partner's basements, in the garage, and we were kind of moonlighting and built this whole thing up. And then when digital really started to take off, and I could, the record labels, if you remember these days, they were suing their customers, and they were like, you know, saying you're stealing music with Napster and things like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this isn't right. You know, like the audience, the consumers are telling you what they want, and you're basically saying, no, screw you. You've got to have it this way. And I'm like, that's not computing. Meanwhile, I'm quietly on the side had this other business brewing, and I could see, you know, revenue and things coming. And I was like, you know what, if I don't do it now, I was 27, 28 years old, wasn't married yet or any of that. I was like, if I don't try this now, I'm never going to try it. And so I quit to do it full time. And then we set up a whole bit. I can explain the business if you want, but that's what it was.
So really, you were right at the early stages with the development of the internet. So timing was perfect for you.
I was so lucky. My happy accident, the timing was great, and my happy accident was I came out of the music business, which was one of the first big industries to really lend itself to digital and to be really impacted by digital. And the fact that we had set up a business, this is 1999, 2000, that was driving hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue via the internet tied to music, because we were selling like merchandise and t-shirts and things for punk rock bands, actually. Yeah. All of a sudden, we were of interest, and I'm flying up to Silicon Valley for meetings with like the biggest VCs, my partner and I, and all of a sudden we're talking to these people, and they're telling us we have these huge valuations, and it was insane. And I went through all these crazy experiences as a result. But yeah, so it was very fortunate to have that.
So you mentioned about venture capital and that. So what actually happened to the business? How big did it get, and when did you decide to sell?
Well, so that's the business that we first started that was called Fanscape, and we turned that, it pivoted several times. And it's one of the great lessons that I always try to tell entrepreneurs is like, don't be afraid to listen to the marketplace. Don't be afraid to pivot. And, you know, there's just so much learning there. And so we had these VCs, and that was based on this e-commerce model that was destined to fail. And they actually made an offer to buy our company and merge it with somebody else and give us stock. And I don't know what gave us the guts to turn that down, but we turned it down. Yeah. And then sure enough, the .com bubble burst, and we went on. And what we did is we pivoted, and we realized we're really good marketers, and we were building data. And the real value was in that, not in selling t-shirts. And so we changed the way it worked. Is our connection okay? Are you still there?
Yep, you're all fine, but just, the odd time it just glitches a little bit. But
okay, are we good?
Yeah, fine at the moment.
Okay, great. So we we pivoted out of e-commerce, and essentially what happened was we became this sort of community online marketing company for music, which now I can look back and go, we were doing social media marketing before it was ever called social. Yeah. And again, timing and happy accident that we were doing it with music and huge musicians. So we were able to have huge volumes of people coming through our databases, coming through our systems as we were creating these fan communities. And we were creating communities before MySpace and before Facebook. Yeah. And then those came along, and that was the next pivot, which was we went from being this music marketing online company to being one of the very first social media marketing agencies. because everything we had learned in keeping artists and fans connected could be applied to keeping brands and their consumers connected via social. And we luckily sort of great timing and great experience there.
So with the social media business, was that a separate business to Fanscape, or was that part of Fanscape?
No, so Fanscape pivoted and evolved into that. So all the data we were collecting and all the marketing we were doing for the merchandise and t-shirts, we were able to kind of offload the online store, if you will, and just put it into marketing the bands, whether it was their music, their tours, or everything like that. So it just kept pivoting. And then when it pivoted out of music and it became more social media, it was still the name Fanscape, which we thought applied, and we just became this social media marketing agency. And it evolved. Like, we were very lucky that we were working with these big bands, and then all of a sudden AT&T comes along as a sponsor of this band's tour, and they're like, hey, if you really want to activate this right, you should talk to these guys at Fanscape, because they do all this different kind of marketing, you know. And the next thing we knew, we were getting paid 10 times more money to do the same work that we were doing for a record company, but by a huge company. And being the genius I am, Paul, I was like, ooh, that's a good business model. Maybe we should do more of that corporate stuff. And that's when my partner and I were like, okay, let's do more of that. And then Facebook took off, and all these things started to happen, and all these big brands started scrambling, going, they added sort of social media to their checklist, right? It was print ads, TV, radio, digital, and then they're like, oh, we need this social media thing. And we were in the right place at the right time, doing the work and doing good work. And so that's how it grew from there into this much bigger agency that we eventually sold.
So how big did it get? Like, how many staff did you end up having?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a classic thing, right? We started with like one kid in the basement, and then we moved in an office space. It was 10 people, then 20, then 30. And then I think by the time we sold, we were probably around 30 or 40 people, which was actually pretty small for the big company that bought us. And they told us that. They're like, you're small, but they really needed that capability of what we did. And then it grew, you know, dramatically during what was called our earnout period. So you sell, and then we had an earnout, and we grew, I think, 300% in 3 years.
Wow.
And by then, after the earnout, it kept going, and it wound up at the end, I was at about 140 people in 4 offices all around the country.
Right. So how long were you involved in the business?
About 15 years or so. So through building it, it was probably 10 years. Then we sold it. Then there was another 5 years being in an earnout and sold, and then went on to be the CEO of the digital piece of it. And it was a great run. Everything wound up great. And even our timing of selling, we got very fortunate then too. Like, the timing was good. So very, very lucky. And I'm lucky to have had great people around me, because none of this is me. We've been able to attract great people, great clients, you know, and just very fortunate. And we did good work, which is good.
So let's, just talk about this a little bit more. So from what you're saying, you've said a few times about luck, with good timing. You've also now mentioned good staff. Yeah, I mean, what do you think were all the ingredients? I mean, obviously I've touched on some, but what do you put down, and what were your lessons from that business?
I think the biggest things, I think just business lessons in general, is you've got to be resilient. You've got to be hungry. You've got to be open-minded and be resourceful. And that's like, if you can kind of do those things, and then on just the human side, like, be a good person, do what you say you're going to do good work, treat people well, and like, good things will happen. And that's kind of how it played out. Is our internet wobbly again?
Yeah, you're fine now, but just momentarily. Yeah. It's interesting that you're saying all these things, because, it's often common for people to feel that those that go on to success like you have can often be, very single focused, highly opinionated about themselves, some fairly not such positive kind of qualities, as it were. But what you're saying is actually quite different. You're very inclusive, very humble, pragmatic. So yeah, it's good to hear that. It's interesting to hear that you don't fit what often could be portrayed in the media as the stereotypical successful business person. So it's interesting. So for you though, you talk about luck. What's your view on luck?
Well, I'm a big believer in you make your own luck and
Right.
you kind of stick around in it. And, if you like what you're doing and you're focused, then usually, good things, you kind of make your luck. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think I kind of call it more like the happy accident of things, of
Right.
the timing and figuring it out. But I would also say, like, you just kind of navigate your way through things. And I'm not, now I know a lot more than I did then, as far as how to pivot and how to
Yeah.
listen. It's nice of you to say all those nice things about me. I'm not sure if I was as humble, then. I don't know. I'd like to think I was, but you
Yeah.
can definitely, there is an element of drive and vision and stubbornness that can actually feed you. Like, I was saying this to somebody the other day, it was like it never crossed my mind, even like when we weren't doing well as a business and there were dips, in there.
Yeah.
It just never crossed my mind that this would fail. That
Right.
and it was just like, there's just no way I'm letting this fail. And one way or the other, I'm going to figure it out. And there's hard times where, you have to lay people off or this and that. But it was just,
Yeah.
I was very driven to figure it out and make it succeed, because I really, same way I was driven by the fear of winter, I was then, once I had the business, driven by the fear of having to have a real job again, or a regular job again, and having a boss. That just
Yeah.
wasn't appealing to me.
Yeah.
When you,
So,
when you,
so
yeah.
so what happened to you after that? So you finished with Fanscape ultimately. What happened from there?
Well, so Fanscape then we merged as part of Omnicom, which is this big agency holding company. We became part of another agency that was in there, called the marketing arm. And they were wonderful people, great people. And I wound up, after the earnout, after the sale, they asked me to be the head of their whole digital division. And so I basically folded in Fanscape and other elements, and then we kept growing and became a little bit more of all of a sudden I was running like a digital agency within a big holding company. And
Yeah.
and we had success and we kept growing the services, but they call you the CEO and you're leading a division, but at the end of the day, you still have a boss, you're still reporting to people, and you're responsible for a lot. And that started to take its toll on me. And I started to not feel entrepreneurial
Yeah.
anymore, because I was I always say, you're managing a little bit more than leading.
Yeah.
And which is totally fair, and it's what they needed. But it was sort of, I started to feel a little bit miscast. And I felt like I had done it. I felt like we had the success, we had grown it, and I wanted that next challenge. Like, for me, I had the music industry and I did well there. Then I had the advertising business and I did well there. And I was like, oh, I wonder what the next thing's going to be.
Yeah.
So I left and started on this next journey.
So tell us about the next journey then. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I had the entrepreneurial bug was in me still, I could feel, and I was trying to do a lot of that stuff within the company, but it was hard. And I learned a lot, being a C-level executive at a big company and making numbers and margins and all that. And it was great, but I was like, I want to start something up again, and I want to be my own boss again. So that was what I set out to do. And I had a few ideas, and one of them was this company called Reserved, which was the next thing we embarked upon, which was a venture, which is a SaaS business. And our whole idea was, how can we make waiting in line optional? It seemed like everybody's got a mobile phone, everybody's got this technology. Why can't we create like a Disney Fast Pass for your life? And that's what we were trying to do. Is our connection bad again?
That's all good for me. That's all
Is
good
it?
for me. The scent. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm so sorry.
That's right.
So anyway, that was what we set out to create, and we did that. And then at the same time, I had this vision for what I've really set out to create, this future-proof group, which is, one part we're advising small middle market companies like what I had been doing. And at the same time, we're building our own ventures. And back to the nice things you were saying to me when we started, it was exactly that. It was like, well, I'm practicing what I preach. Like, I've been there, I've done that, and I'm still doing it with my own businesses, but it makes me so much better to be an advisor to all these other companies, because not only have I done a lot of this stuff, but I'm also still currently doing it. And so
Yeah.
it keeps me fresh and it keeps me able, and these things kind of feed themselves as sort of the vision of the company. And so that's what we set out to do. So sort of these two things that
So
can
you
feed
feel
into
that, yeah, so from what you're saying, you feel that it's been mutually beneficial to be on one hand doing a consultancy business, and on the other hand, been doing your own sort of entrepreneurial projects, that one actually helps the other. Is that what I'm understanding? That's how you feel, that you've actually, and I guess what I would imagine is like, by helping other businesses kind of helps you then to focus on your own and ask some of the similar questions about your own and keep yourself on point on your own.
Yeah, so you were saying, I think you were actually doing a better job of explaining my thesis than me, which is the idea is by doing both, I'm actually better at both. And you couldn't be more right, that there are times when I catch myself giving advice to an entrepreneur or founder or questioning them on something. And then when we're done with the meeting, I sit to myself, I'm like, wow, that's a good, I should be saying that to myself on this venture. And that's applicable. And similarly, things that go on with my ventures, I get learnings that can be beneficial for the people I'm working with and advising. So it's, to me, it's a 1 + 1 = 3 all the way.
Yeah, sure. Now, and part of doing that, I was just reading that you've had a successful business that you sold off, which you touched on before. I think to do with you've described it as like a fast pass system. So tell me about that business, a little bit more about that, and why you ended up selling.
Yeah, so that was it. I kind of stumbled in again. To me, being an entrepreneur in businesses is about solving problems. And I, my whole life, just I hate inefficiency, and waiting in line to me was a huge inefficiency. And I was inspired, actually. I took my family to Disney World, and they had created this, mobile app that you could do fast passes, and I could plan all the rides we were going to take, 60 days before we got there. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. Why can't I have this for my regular life and for other things that I do? I'm not seeing you, so you're like totally frozen on my end.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing you fine. Yeah.
Here. Okay, I'll just keep going.
You just keep going, and I'll let you know if there's a problem at my end. Otherwise, just assume it's all good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, so that was the thesis, was that we could help things be more efficient. We could help companies. So it was by making life better for your customer, we were making life better for the actual business, and they were gathering all this valuable consumer data about when their people shop, when they want to be there, and they could use it as a CRM. So we really had a pretty broad vision of it. We grew it. We got a few clients. We started doing it. We had super happy customers. All this stuff was going on, and then COVID hit. And we're like, oh, this actually can now serve a higher purpose because we can help keep people safe. And that was good to an extent, but it was also like a big, slog, like a lot of work because, the world turned upside down. At the meantime, we raised money. We, got it off the ground. We were going. And what happened was, and again, this is being resourceful. And I'm one of the coaching I always say is to always have options. And as we were trying to raise a next round of money, we got introduced to a competitive company that was doing a similar thing, primarily in South America was their base, and they were looking to get more in the US. And we talked to them, and they were great. They had more funding. They were way further along. And we just shared visions. We totally hit it off. And I was like, the next day meeting with an investor, and I'm like, I'm trying to raise a bunch of money to basically replicate what these guys already have.
Right.
And that seems dumb to me. And I'm like, they're ahead of us. I like them. They're smart. Like, we like each other. We can help each other. This is just the right time and the right, situation with the right people to exit this business and kind of turn over to them and let them give them, the ammo in any way we can to help them grow and build from there. And so we wound up having a transaction a few months ago, and they're off to the races and doing well. And
so that sounds to me like your 12-year-old pragmatic self coming back to play, realizing that yes, you do have a vision, you could go down this path, but realistically maybe this is actually the better option. So yeah, it seems like a skill from what you learned when you're a 12-year-old helped you then make that decision.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. I think if you can be detached, and it also, it helps to have some level of kind of common sense or street smarts, or just, you're able to kind of look at the world. And I think I'm able to do that in business. And I had the experience, like back to Fanscape, when we sold to Omnicom, I didn't really want to sell. We didn't really want to sell the company, but we knew we had to. We knew we had hit a threshold, which was good, but we knew how hot this was getting. And in order to grow, we were going to have to become part of something bigger. And that's exactly what we did. And it worked. So similarly, I was like, these guys are great. They've built the technology we're trying to build. They've got it. Like, this is just the right thing to do. And you're right. And you kind of take it's less about emotion and personal needs and what's right for the business and what's right for your clients. And this was a no-brainer to us to do. And I'm really happy about it. But that's interesting. Pointed out. Yeah,
that is a challenge though, because people can become very emotionally attached to what they're doing. They can put their heart and soul into a business. So to be able to step back and look at it pragmatically and go, well, yeah, but this is the time. It's not something that I'd suggest that everyone's able to do. Some people are so clouded by their emotion that they can't make that decision.
That's exactly right. And look, there's some level of passion and emotion that's really important, especially as a founder and an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But then you have to have that separation, and also try to surround yourself with people that you trust, who are going to tell you if your baby's ugly. And sometimes you can get blinded by it, and really just be able to objectively look at something and have the vision as well to do it, but not be so attached. And you're right. It is amazing how many times you see businesses make bad moves or have mistakes, even on huge levels, because of ego, or I would usually say ego more, but also emotion. And look, that's part of being a human being. But in business, if you can separate that and surround yourself with people who can help you when you don't see it clearly, I think that's huge.
Yeah. So one of the kind of mixed messages that I think that people get out there when it comes to business is, on one hand, they're told, to succeed, you can't quit. And then on the other hand, you're told, you've got to be able to identify when something's not working and to move on to something else. And, I feel that for most of us, myself included, that presents quite a challenge and quite a potential contradiction. Then on one hand, those that succeed don't quit; they just keep pushing through and pushing through. But on the same, by the same token, you've then got to go and identify when something's not working and move on. How do you do that? How do you know, have that mindset that you're not going to quit, but also be able to realize when something just isn't going to work? Because you hear so many stories about people that are about to quit, and then the next week, just before they quit, it all took off or what have you, So how do you know? I mean, it's such a challenge.
Yeah, I think you get comfortable sort of being uncomfortable, number one. And then you get comfortable knowing there's no such thing as perfect. And you're never, and so that would be the first part. And then it's the mindset of, I look at it as surrounding yourself with the right resources and the right people and the right inputs that are going to help sort of keep you honest, right? And also really, there's that saying of, you've got to be working on the business rather than in it. And every entrepreneur falls into the trap of they're just in it all day and they can't see the forest through the trees and all those other cliches. And then you miss it and you blow it. But if you look at yourself as the owner. And this is the hardest discipline. But like, I own this business, but yes, I also work in it. And if you can make that separation and stay in that owner mindset and look at things, then it's easy to objectively look at it. Then you've got to look at the marketplace and hopefully have good vision. I've often been told that I'm decent with vision, and so I've been very lucky, I guess, in that's maybe my skill or my gift or whatever you want to call it. That comes naturally to me, but I'm usually able to kind of see what's coming or see around the corner, and that's really useful in business. And if you can't do it, and I always test my thesis of like, here's what I think, but I'm going to go around to people I trust and I'm going to ask, and you've got to be open to hearing all sorts of stuff, but trying to do it. But I guess when you say quit, sometimes quit is the greatest thing, for yourself or for the business. And if you kind of label yourself as a quitter, that's not going to be good versus a tour of duty. I did that. This was that run. Now that's set me up and the raw materials to do this next thing. Yeah. And this was all to get there. Like I used to say when I was the youngest VP at the record company, I'm like, that was the graduate school I never went to. Right. And I looked at it like that. And they were great to me. I was great to them. But I was like, that was just a stepping stone to learn how to do the next thing and the next thing. Yeah. And so that's how I look at it. But yeah, it's if you can remove emotion and do it, and then you also have to check in with yourself. Like, do I like doing it? So many people, they're miserable in their own business, and you're like, want to check in, go, what's the purpose of life here? And the last thing I'd say, Paul, is check with your gut. I think your gut never lies. And when you make a decision, just sit with it for a minute and think, does your body feel excited? Does your body feel nervous? Your gut will tell you. And I think there's a lot of value in just stillness and awareness and like listening to like your body might tell you, hey, it's time. And I had that several times, whether it made me, business made me sick, or I didn't feel well, or I was and I would just stop and get in touch with, why am I feeling like this? What's going on?
It's interesting you say that. I remember reading an article about a study that was done of Fortune 500 company CEOs, and it found that one of the consistent traits was that they tended to listen to their gut. When they made decisions, they made them and they never looked back. So they're quite decisive when they made decisions. They listened to the gut were two of the key things that came out of that study. So it's interesting, to hear you saying similar things.
And I'd add one piece to that. Now we live in a world where there's so much data and there's AI and there's so much incredible information that everyone should add that to the mix. Like you can be informed so well to then make a better decision and a more informed decision. And then everything you just said is totally right. Yeah. But there's a lot of data out there now that'll help you, whether it's consumer data or just financial data or market data, it's all there. And it's,
So tell me, one of the impressions that I've had with a lot of small business owners is that there's almost like this mentality of they feel good just being busy. That if they're busy, they associate that with it being good. It doesn't matter what they're doing. So, so often I come across, small business owners and you're like, well, you need to really work. And I say to them, you really need to work on your business. And they're like, oh, I'm too busy. I'm like, you need to sort of do these things. And no, I'm too busy, and you follow them up and, I haven't got that done. I'm too busy. But I do get that real sense, and I feel that I could be guilty of it too, of you associate being busy with being positive without qualifying what sort of busyness it is, but just, if you're really busy, then that's a good thing. And I kind of feel that a lot of businesses fall into that trap where they feel that the business owners feel that, well, I'm really busy, so that's a good thing, without stepping back and going, well, I'm really busy because I'm doing a lot of jobs that other people should be doing, and I'm not spending time actually strategically planning where to next. Is that something you have come across?
100%. I think you said it really well. There's two great statements I like to use, especially when I'm advising companies, which is one is, don't mistake movement for achievement. And
Right,
that's
like
pretty
it.
much what you're saying. And then
Yeah,
there's the old saying of work smarter, not harder.
yeah,
And I think you're totally right. I think we're all guilty of it. I'm still guilty of it, even though I try to call myself on it. And when we're helping advise companies or do things, it's amazing how you see that. And there's just sort of a culture of that. If I'm busy, I'm worthy, I'm worthwhile, it satisfies something. And instead of going towards a mapped out goal and trying to do it as efficiently as possible, and there should be no shame in I can get this done quicker. And that's
yeah,
where I come back to the resourcefulness concept of if you're really resourceful, in theory, you can get a lot of stuff done by just figuring out, partners or people or different ways to get it done. You don't have to do it all yourself. And if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you better get comfortable really fast being resourceful
yeah,
because you've got that today things move way too fast. And
yeah,
so that's it. But yeah, you come across it all the time and it's a real shame, but there's comfort in it too,
yeah,
which is people take comfort in kind of doing what they know how to do, or how many people just sit and answer emails all day,
yeah,
and that feels good, it satisfies something,
yeah.
but no, it's not ideal, not when you're trying to lead a business.
No. Just something else that I kind of thought of when you were talking before, one thing I think that is a positive for Americans over us here in New Zealand is that my impression with Americans is that, if you fail in business, it's almost like a badge of honor, that if you have a few businesses go under, it's perceived that potentially you've learnt a lot. You've gone through and that business has failed, but you would have learnt a lot and you've gone on and maybe several other businesses have failed. But potentially you've learnt a lot, which is invaluable for the future. Whereas here, to fail is like dishonorable.
Right.
We look very negatively upon someone who fails in business. And I personally feel that that's something that we've got wrong, and that potentially you guys have a better view on. And it's not to encourage you to just go out and fail for the sake of failing, but I do believe that you learn more when you face challenges than when everything's going well. So if your business has failed and you've got the right attitude, then there was a lot that you would have learnt from that, which can be advantageous for the future. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess I'm full of sayings, but there's no such thing as failures. There's just learnings, and every failure, if you will, is a learning that's an investment in your future. And if you can get that mindset, it's really hard to do, and you have to have your ego in check, because a lot of what you just described, plays into the ego, and no one wants to fail. Like I can remember, for me, when I was at the C-suite of the big company, like when you don't meet your numbers, and like meaning we were still really profitable, but we didn't hit the percentage profit that we were supposed to, and
Yeah,
they just make you feel like crap, like you blew it. And I'm like, wait a minute, this company is still making millions of dollars. We're
yeah,
doing great work, great jobs, but it didn't make enough millions,
yeah,
and that was really a struggle because you'd feel like you failed. And I'm like, wow, that doesn't really compute. But I couldn't agree. It's a shame that that's the case. And in fact, I was just advising somebody, and they put 7 figures of money into something, and it quote unquote failed. And I'm like,
yeah,
if you look at that as like an investment, and you look at it like you just made $1 million investment in yourself, as if that was your graduate school and that was
yeah,
your graduate learning, you just got that school of hard knocks because you're going to be so much better for the next one. If you
yeah,
can frame it that way, I think it'll help you. And that's what I try to do. Like I've got things that have failed. I would tell you my companies were failing at different points. We pivot them. They get better. There's just all those things, but you try not to judge yourself too much
yeah,
and keep going and just go, what is the universe telling me right now, and what can I learn from it?
yeah.
And that does suck. That was bad, but what I can't really do much. Let's pick ourselves back up and go for it.
Yeah, I like the way you framed that to say that see that as your investment in your education, whatever amount of money that you lost, that's actually an investment for the future. I think that's a great way to look at it. And if we can look at it that way, it's much more positive and much more likely to lead to a positive outcome than feeling sorry for yourself and feeling, well, I've just blown all this money, without seeing what you've actually achieved and learned through that process.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's a healthier way to look at it.
Yeah.
And, what are you going to do? You're going to beat yourself up all day, or you're going to pick yourself back up and do something about it and take the gains. And this is, again, why I've set up my advisory thing. Is it's so fun to talk to companies who are like on the verge of making a mistake I made. And I'm like, let me tell you how much I screwed this up. And you're about to do it, and it cost me this, this, and this. Here's what I learned. Please take this and do what you will with it. And I probably saved them tons of money, tons of time, and more importantly, the stress.
Yeah.
Just here it is. And so it's a real pleasure now to kind of do it. And I had this situation. I had someone sue me. I had this, and it was only 10 years later that I was like, helped somebody else avoid that situation. And I kind of reconciled it myself, going, that's why I had that experience 10 years ago, was to help this person not have it and to avoid it for myself. And I kind of was just at peace, going, that was my learning. It took me 10 years to get the learning, but that was the learning. There it was, and that's all you can do.
But that was a good feeling for you. Like, you really found it quite satisfying, the fact that you had gone through something traumatic and that you were able to help someone else avoid doing the same thing.
The best feeling in the world. I mean, life to me is about giving and helping, and that it's just such a wonderful feeling to help somebody avoid pitfalls that they might not know are coming, or at least inform them. Say, here's how it happened. And back to your point with me, like, I have lived these things, and I'm not just going out of a textbook. Like, I'm going out of, like, this really happened, and this is what went on, and here's how I dealt with it, and here's where I screwed up, and here's where I let emotion take over, and that one emotional conversation cost me $100,000, and all these things that come up, and you kind of live and learn a little bit, and but yes, it's the greatest feeling in the world to help, and that's why we set up Future Proof Advisors to be like this all outsourced board, for all these companies, mid-market, emerging companies that don't have this. They just don't have, they haven't surrounded themselves with people who've done that, because they're doing what you said. They're so busy working in the business on it, tunnel vision, and they're succeeding. But my God, we can help them get so much further faster by just adding that little bit of experience or information or connections or things like that. It's my great pleasure. And now I look back going, this is why, I went through all that, is because I'm now able to help.
So tell me, to answer this question, I kind of want you to think back in the early days and to now, but to what extent has money been the motivation in what you've done? So firstly, when you were young, when you were starting out, and now, to what extent when you start up a business, is it financially motivated? And if it's not financially motivated, what are the motivations typically?
It varies, right? Different life stages, money matters in different ways. So at the beginning, it was everything to me, and maybe it's, my dad was a stockbroker, right? So he dealt with money all the time. And it was always kind of ingrained in me, whether for better or for worse, like, you need to be self-reliant. You need to be able to support yourself. And so with my whole thing of, there's no family out here in LA, like, I'm going to go make my own way, like, money was going to be the foundation. So money was very much the driver. And to, a larger extent probably than I'd like. And then when you make enough money, then it starts to become like, what am I interested in? What's passionate, and what do I think will work? And it can be a little bit less of a motivator. And then when if the economy goes down, then money becomes a big thing. Or in my case, I get married and we have kids and we have a house, and all of a sudden my expenses go up. then money is a motivator. But I've always found if money is your primary motivator, it's not really a good thing. It hasn't, at least for me, if it's my number one objective, it doesn't serve me well, versus if I just do the right inputs and do the right things and do the kind of work that I'm uniquely capable of, and I'm solving a problem and helping people, then the money will follow. And if you let that mission sort of lead and solving problems and all that, then good things will come as a result. But if you are driven by money, it can screw you up. And I've experienced that working for big companies. You see that as much as they tell you it's not, money's the driver, and that can really screw things up. In some cases it doesn't. In some cases it really works. But for me, that's what I've found. So it's varied, I guess, Paul. It's been back and forth at different stages of my life where money matters more. A friend of mine said this great thing. He goes, I want to make enough money so to the point where money will never influence any decision I make.
Yeah.
And that's like, oh my God, wouldn't we all love to be in that position?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. I guess it just comes down to your interpretation of where that bar sits to achieve that. And the problem is that bar might keep shifting. Yeah,
in my life, the way my family operates, that bar keeps going up. But yeah, it's definitely that, right? And it's also your risk tolerance, and it comes from your self-belief. And if you ask yourself what's the worst thing that can possibly happen, and then you try to build from that, like as a business mindset move, that it'll help you kind of get over the money fears and just keep going for what you're talented at, what you're passionate about, and where you can contribute. Yeah.
So with you dealing with the different businesses that you do, just as a summary, like where do you think a lot of people come unstuck in business? Is there anything that jumps out at you as being one of the things that, often they come unstuck with?
The first thing that comes to my mind is people. It just always seems to come down to like people. And there's a great line I heard, when we were raising money, and this venture capitalist said, I've got to love the team and not hate the idea. And it was such a really interesting dynamic of like, it so much comes down to people. And I find that where entrepreneurs get stuck is just people problems or people issues or things that stem from that. And so you try to help them, have the right vision, the right mission, and then surround themselves with like-minded team people who want to go do that. So I always look at that's where they can get a little tripped up.
Yeah.
And then also I'd couple it with lack of a real plan. They're so, especially in the smaller mid-market, like I remember this. I was just like, I got to make payroll. Like, I gotta, I have this moment, Paul, I'll never forget. We moved into an office and I'm like, yeah, we're going to go do it. And then I had to write the check, the rent check for the first and last month's rent, which was thousands of dollars. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do it. And I'm writing this check out of my personal account and my hand is shaking. And I thought like everything's great, we're going for it. And then this is where your gut doesn't lie. I mean, my hand was shaking so much because I was so nervous because I'm like, oh my God, like, I don't know what I'm doing. And maybe so you have that kind of sink or swim mentality. And I think a lot of have that rather than like this ownership mentality of like big picture. So once I get the people squared away, enterprise value, right? Right. How am I creating real enterprise value? And I think so many just miss it. And I missed it big time with my company. So back to, 15 years ago, we had a database of millions and millions of music fans, and we knew everything about them. Wow. And I was busy just trying to get like somebody to pay me monthly to do marketing instead of realizing, oh my God, we're sitting on this huge valuable asset that we can monetize in different ways. And I wish, I had me now to tell me to go, here's a pivot opportunity, here's something to do. So I think that hopefully that's maybe too roundabout of a way to answer, but I think people and lack of a real strategy plan and towards enterprise value.
So with just going back to that, so you're telling me, the business that you had, Fanscape, you pivoted, so you still had the huge database of music fans, but you also then got into the corporate world targeting, doing their marketing as well. And that all stayed together and you sold that together all as one. Is that what happened?
Yeah, the reality is the music database just became stale and old as we stopped working in it. And to the credit of the major labels, they started harvesting. They realized what we were doing, and they're like, wait a minute, we should have that data, and the bands should have it. And so it just, it kind of transitioned out. And I would tell you, we were a little too early. Back to timing.
Right.
Created things that were similar. The real value was the community and the data, and we were just so focused on making payroll and getting paid that we didn't have an investment, so we kind of blew that. So yeah, by the time we sold the company, those assets were years and years old and dormant.
Yeah.
So it was irrelevant at that point, and everything had moved to social media. All those email addresses, this was an age when everyone stopped looking at their email and they were just on their MySpace account or their Facebook account. And that's back when those things were organic and you didn't have to pay to reach people.
Right.
So that's timing that I screwed up in a bad way, so there were good timing and that was bad timing.
Yeah.
You could I was sitting on something that was worth 10 times what we wound up selling our company for.
Well, that's life. You can never look backwards though. You got to look forwards though, don't you?
Exactly. But those are learnings, right? And that's where I try to help people now focus on, yes, you can get caught up in all the people problems, but let's talk about your enterprise value and what your real goals are. What's your North Star? What do you want? Because so often you create this business, to like serve the life that you want to have. And then within a month, you're a servant to the business. And every reason, you tried to be an entrepreneur just like backfired on you, and you're right back. You've just created this job for yourself. So sometimes you got to remind people of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's more than you want it to be more than just creating a job for yourself.
Yeah, but so many people fall into that because that's just what they're used to.
Yeah,
and it's hard to break that habit.
Yeah, for sure. Now, just touching on what you said before about staff, and I'm just translating that to things here at the moment. One of the problems we have, and I don't know whether you've got it over there, is that real shortage of staff, quality people here in New Zealand at the moment. And there's so many businesses I talk to, and they're like, if you said to me, Paul, what would be the one thing that you think would be hampering growth of businesses in New Zealand right now? Anecdotally, without having done a study, I would say shortage of quality staff. Businesses having trouble getting good staff.
I would say, sorry, did you have more?
Yeah, so how do you combat that? You might have a great little business, but you can't get the damn people to help run it.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. We're experiencing the same thing in the US, and I think it's all about being agile, flexible, and resourceful, because the labor market has changed. COVID accelerated the inevitable. People were already starting to move towards freelance work, the side hustle, all these different things. And so now I do agree with you, and I'm seeing it. It's harder for people to hire that kind of traditional 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, work for people. But if the business owner, entrepreneur gets a little creative, gets a little flexible, kind of breaks themselves of those habits and says, okay, I'm laser focused on this one task that needs to get done, or this one need I have. There's a tremendous market of freelancers and part-timers that you can get. It then comes back to you being, able to adjust, being flexible, and saying, okay, this sucks because I'm used to everybody being in my office at this time, but wow, I have access to that expert over there. That can help me achieve this goal. And I think if you look at it that way, the whole world opens up. Like, I'll tell you, for my business, Paul, I've got people actually in New Zealand, Africa, South America, all over the United States, and we've just gone to this fully remote thing, and I'm able to get freelance people and some of the best people to work on their thing, and it's just a different way of operating. You know, I went, and I used to be the guy who was a pain in the ass and like looking around going, who left at exactly 5 p.m. You know, I was that guy, like, who's not here right at 9 a.m. in my office. But technology has changed all that, and COVID helped show us that you really can be productive and you really can build in alternative ways. So back to the, be a little flexible is my advice.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, actually. Listening to you, I'm thinking, yeah, you're right. We've got to, we can be often very regimented in our view, and we've got to maybe take a step back and be a bit more creative and be open to maybe a different approach to achieve the same objective.
Yeah, and that's when the truth comes out, Paul, because then you're like, oh crap, I have to really define the objective. I really have to be like clear on what their job description is and what the output is and what the KPIs are.
Yeah.
And you'll find, people sometimes just throw people at the problem or throw more resources, and they haven't really been clear about what they want. And this kind of forces that too. So there are some advantages, but it is true. It went really fast from being, a buyer's market to a seller's market.
Yeah, it's just slightly off topic, but just very quickly, the whole COVID thing is just potentially changing so many things. And another example would be probably with business travel. I was reading an article they're saying with the airlines that potentially business travel was growing year on end up until 2019. But with COVID, they're now saying that they don't expect it to ever come back to what it was. And it's just incredible, isn't it? Over a short space of time, and suddenly everything's flipped, and we're having to look at things quite differently now in some respects to what we did in the past.
Totally agree. I mean, I think this was all inevitable, and now COVID really did accelerate that. Like I will give you an example. In the agency business, like it was all about relationship, and you had to always show up at the client for the big pitch. And you've been to America enough. Like there was one day I flew from LA to Miami, had one meeting, turned right around and flew home.
Wow.
And so that was like 6 hours each way for like an hour and a half meeting. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, this is the dumbest thing that I could be doing. And meanwhile, I get in the conference room, there's a huge screen set up for like teleconference. And I'm like, I could have done this, but it wouldn't have shown the respect to the client, or we wouldn't have really hungry that we wanted their business. And nowadays, I think you could totally say, hey, we'll just meet with you via Zoom. It's much more efficient and it's acceptable, whereas it didn't used to. So I think it's totally true that business travel, it'll change. And then you have to think even further down the road when you can have avatars and you can, use the VR and it can really feel like you're in the same room.
Yeah.
There's huge efficiency that comes with it. But again, things change, and that to me is exciting. That's why I named my company Future Proof. Like I love seeing the things that are going to happen, and I find it really exciting.
But we need to change our minds to go with it, to see the opportunity particularly as well.
Yeah, and that's all about mindset, right? And at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing. And being open to change and evolution, because it's happening faster than ever, and we're all seeing it. But to me, there's way more pros than cons.
So to wrap this up, I wanted to ask you if you could, as succinctly as you can, just summarize, what do you think are the keys to success? What are the things that you think that those that succeed have that maybe others that aspire to succeed but don't have? And I'm talking in the context primarily business, but I think a lot of success, there's a lot of commonality potentially in the qualities needed to succeed, whether it's in sport or in business. But what do you think are the keys? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, number one to me is resourcefulness. I always tell people the right answer is out there somewhere. Your job's to go find it.
Yeah.
Number two is kindness. It just never hurts to be kind, and always remember just being human and kind.
Yeah.
And I think those things are like super critical just in life and in business. And if you can do those elements, I think, I'm just trying to be succinct. I can come up with a lot more, but I think those two, like foundationally, can be there. And maybe if I was to add another, which you and I were talking about, is having a level of detachment, of being able to sort of separate yourself and ego from like the task at hand, and being able to do that. So that way you can objectively look at things and try to do it. There's a great saying I heard, again, I'm full of the sayings, but you try to describe reality without emotion or blame. I'm sorry, without judgment or blame. You describe reality without judgment or blame, which is super hard to do, right? Who can actually
absolutely.
But if you try to do it, and that comes from detachment, you can get along. So I think those are kind of the things, like you got to be like a bit of a hustler with resourcefulness, and be kind just as a human, and stay detached, because the world, when you're open to things, a lot of great things happen if you are open. And maybe that'd be the last one, listening. Just shut up and listen.
That's a good one. So just very briefly, tell me a little bit about the kindness one, though, because I think people will find that quite interesting. You were saying kindness. Why do you think that's so important?
I just think, being a human being and being alive, like we're so privileged, right, to live, especially like where you live and where I live, which nice weather again, and nice places, but like it's just, life's too short to be a jerk, and you kind of get what you give, and I always live by when it comes to, you can either be right or be kind, just choose being kind, and be caring, and be good to your fellow human, fellow business, and just be, a good person. There's a book I love called The Go Giver instead of The Go Getter.
Right.
And it's just about be giving and be kind. And I think just for me, I've tried to live my life that way and be very respectful in business and in life. And I've found a lot of good things happen. And when I'm being entrepreneurial, I'm lucky that I'm able to attract some good people around me. And I like to think it's because I'm fair, I'm honest, I'm nice. And that to me all just stems from kindness.
Yeah.
Not a bad way.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really good. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm going to talk to you in a minute. We're going to do Read to Succeed. But in terms of insights into success, it's just been a real honor to talk to you, because as I said at the outset, the fact that you have not only clearly gone out and succeeded, but you're also now consulting with others. And I think I love the idea that you're actually still being entrepreneurial, so you're still fulfilling that sort of need that you have for yourself. But excuse me, but at the same time, you're also helping translate a lot of what you've learned to people that you work for. And I think that must be absolutely invaluable. And for those that get the opportunity to work with you, I think are going to benefit tremendously from it.
That's very nice of you. Thank you. It's so nice to talk to you. And I appreciate the way you've thought this through, the kinds of questions you're asking, and the fact that you're putting this out to try to help people. I think both you and I come from that place. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much.